Released alongside Pikmin 1 on the Switch is the game's longer, more refined and more challenging sequel, Pikmin 2. This is the second video in our Pikmin series, exploring how the franchise has evolved in each iteration of the game now that all the numbered titles are available on the Nintendo Switch, with the latest entry Pikmin 4 about to drop. Growing up, Pikmin 2 was always my preferred game of the original GameCube titles, but I know some people saw its new additions as more frustrating than fun, overcomplicating the original structure with more Pikmin types to manage, an entirely new dungeon crawling aspect, and just more junk to collect. Personally though, I love the junk, and in fact, Pikmin 2 might have my favourite storyline and objectives of the game's release so far. Pikmin 2's plot takes place immediately after the first one ends, with Olimar returning home from vacation, only to have the ship we spent the entire last game rebuilding get repossessed to pay off the ginormous loan the company he works for has amounted thanks to the new recruit Louis. However, after discovering that a single bottle cap is apparently worth more than a year's worth of salary for the Hocotate, which is just absurdly funny to me, Olimar is immediately sent back to the Pikmin planet with Louis in tow, to save his company. Poor guy didn't even get to say hello to his wife and kids. The story of paying off a debt by collecting random Earth objects like bottle caps, aloe vera, and old Nintendo toys is incredibly charming, as are the names and descriptors for these objects given to it by the ship, who's just trying to speculate what these might have been used for. The treasures being real-world objects that we see every day, but looked at from an outsider's perspective, calls back to the old philosophical idea of what aliens might think if they saw the human race without context, and it's way more fun than collecting random machine parts for a spaceship, or just collecting fruit like in Pikmin 3. I'm glad that Pikmin 4 appears to be bringing this back. Charm is all over Pikmin 2, from the humorous emails Olimar receives from the President to the bestiography of all the enemies the players will fight that gives descriptors and allows you to feed them Pikpik carrots. As Olimar isn't alone on the planet this time, there is also more dialogue in Pikmin 2 than in the first game, which might turn some people off, but I find it to be further charming. Speaking of not being alone, Olimar is joined by Louis, and a second captain is given to the player. The two can now travel together or split up in order to do multiple tasks across the game's larger worlds at the same time. Kind of. The concept is there, but in practice the player still needs to guide Olimar and Louis themselves, and they can't do that at the same time. Its main use comes from saving time for the player, who can set a bunch of Pikmin upon an automated task, like breaking a barrier, and then swap to the other captain across the map who can then perform other tasks while waiting for the fence to break. You could do this in Pikmin 1 if you planned out your day like I did, but Pikmin 2 makes this process that little bit easier and more efficient. Honestly, the main thought I had in mind about this partner system was that it was done so much better in Pikmin 3. I'll talk about it in detail in that video, but going back to Pikmin 2 after playing Pikmin 3 just makes me miss all the convenience and automation that game offers. In its current state in Pikmin 2, I just find that I leave Louis or Olimar back at the ship most of the time, and swap to them only when I have found a task for the captain I am currently controlling to do, or when I run out of Pikmin and need to restock. Still, it's not a feature that takes away from the game, and with the new 2-player battle mode, it gives Olimar his own Luigi to compete against. Also travelling alongside Olimar are the Pikmin, with a total of 5 types this time. The original red, yellow and blue colours, and then the new types, purple and white. Focusing on the returning 3 first, I complained that in the first game, the 3 Pikmin types were severely unbalanced, and that yellow in particular was pretty useless outside of very context-sensitive situations. But not anymore. It was always odd that in Pikmin 1, red and blue Pikmin were clearly tied to an element, while yellow Pikmin were just based around explosions. You'd think that would line up with red if any colour. But now in Pikmin 2, electricity is introduced as a new hazard, and that gives the yellow Pikmin something it can be strong against. Now in Pikmin 2, it feels like each Pikmin type is balanced around 2 aspects, an immunity and an environmental mechanic. Red are immune to fire and are the best fighters, yellow are immune to electricity and can be thrown higher, and blue are immune to water and can swim. This is reinforced thanks to new elemental enemy types. The enemy variety in Pikmin 2 is exceedingly higher than in Pikmin 1, and some of these new enemies fight using specific elements. The fire-focused enemies are back from the first game, but now there are creatures that generate electricity and ones that generate water. So even if red is the strongest fighter, it's not the objective best choice for combat in Pikmin 2. That said, I still tended to rely on red Pikmin to engage in battle, with the new purple Pikmin as support. Purple Pikmin are denser than the other types, and in the bulky way, not the brainy way. Purple Pikmin are heavy, weighing more than normal Pikmin, and able to carry as much as 10 Pikmin. In combat, they can also stun enemies around them with a ground pound. It doesn't even need to hit the enemy for it to work, they just need to be in their vicinity. Purple Pikmin don't have an element like the other Pikmin types, but they still follow the same balancing design, having combat use with their stuns and environmental use with how much they can carry and how much they weigh. White Pikmin also follow this design, but closer to the original 3 as they have their own element as well, poison. White Pikmin can survive poison and can also see objects and enemies that are buried in the ground, making them useful for nabbing treasure. They are also faster than the other Pikmin, even when carrying something back to the ship, while purple Pikmin are slower than other types. These two new types are a welcome addition to the game, but they come with some baggage, their rarity. As the game's core objective is collecting treasure, purple Pikmin are inherently the most valuable, as they can carry more objects with less of them. Presumably, in order to prevent players from just using purple Pikmin, the developers decided to make the purple and white Pikmin annoyingly hard to get. In Pikmin 1, there were these flowers called candy pop buds that you could use to turn Pikmin of one colour type into another. They were rarely used and more of a backup mechanic to ensure players never ran out of Pikmin of a particular colour, and to reduce the need to travel back to the ship if you suddenly found you needed yellow Pikmin for some reason, which never happened, let's be real. In Pikmin 2, however, these candy pop buds are the only way to get purple and white Pikmin. Found in the game's cave systems, the violet and ivory candy pop buds will take 5 of the player's Pikmin and spit out 5 of their matching colour before wilting. This is the only way to get these Pikmin types, and that means you must defend them with your life. Losing white and especially purple Pikmin hits so much harder than losing any of the other 3 because the road to getting more is long and tedious. The reason losing purple hurts a lot more is because of one specific treasure towards the end of the game that requires a full 100 squad army of purple Pikmin to collect it, and given you can only get 5 at a time, you better start saving them in advance to avoid some late game grinding. Because of this, my playstyle in Pikmin 2 often fell into the following tactics. I would always bring around 10 white Pikmin and 10 purple Pikmin, just in case there was treasure hidden underground or treasure that weighed a lot. And then I would have 25 yellow and blue Pikmin with the remaining 30 for the red Pikmin. This split would often give me enough Pikmin for any scenario, and before almost any combat encounter I would safely split my squad up into their colour groups and only bring the reds into battle with me. Maybe the purples as well if I felt confident that I could kill the enemy faster than it could attack back. The rest stayed behind with Louie in a safe space so that they wouldn't die. This worked for the overworld, but in the cave system I had to work a bit more on the fly. While you can change Pikmin colours with candy pop buds in the caves, the only way to get new Pikmin is to stumble upon a queen candy pop bud, which isn't always available. Thankfully, a cave will always tell you before you enter what types of hazards you might encounter, so if there is a cave with no water hazards, then I'll leave all my blue Pikmin behind and fill out this new 25 Pikmin gap with Pikmin of red and yellow colours. White and purple Pikmin are always required though to make sure I collect all the treasure in my first run of a cave. Exploring caves can be a huge pain as the layouts are randomly generated and easily the most challenging part of the game, so missing a single treasure on the 8th floor kinda sucks. And let's talk about that challenge, because this is certainly why Pikmin 2 gets such a bad reputation from some fans. Pikmin 1's challenge came from the 30-day timer, which added an element of stress to the overall game that plenty of players did not like. So Pikmin 2 got rid of this idea and gave the player unlimited time to explore and collect every treasure, meaning that for the most part, the game is a far more laid-back time. Making mistakes isn't nearly as fatal, and players can take things at their own pace. Except for in the caves. Compensate for the removed timer, the developers of Pikmin 2 shot up the difficulty exponentially in the cave sections through a combination of limiting player options, harsh penalties, and just vicious trolling. The further into the game you go, the traps in the dungeons become meaner, with random bombs dropping from the sky to destroy unsuspecting hordes of Pikmin. The most upset I ever got in this game was after I strategically went across a floor and took out all the monsters and fire hazards inhabiting it. Then I sent my purple Pikmin to go grab a treasure, changed to Louis so I could call upon more Pikmin, and when I changed back to Olimar, all those purple Pikmin I had previously were gone. I hadn't even noticed the bomb that dropped from the ceiling randomly and killed 9 of my valuable purple Pikmin. Because of all of this, my strategy for the dungeons almost always consisted of exploring it solo with just one of the captains to try and trigger any traps before I then actually advanced through it with everyone else. Another source of major frustration in these caves is how tedious they become, especially if you miss a treasure. Missing a treasure in a cave sucked because if it was, for example, on the 8th sublevel, then that's the majority of any given cave you'll have to travel through again. Thankfully, you'll be spending less time on each floor on the way, assuming you got all the treasure in your first run through, but the obstacles are all back. And this tedium gets even worse due to the presence of water. While I did say all the Pikmin were more balanced in this title, that doesn't change the fact that blue Pikmin should still be the priority for caves, because nothing feels worse than hitting a floor full of water and not having enough blue Pikmin to pick up the treasure hidden there. On your first run through you can't even plan for that, and some of these treasures are behind tough boss battles. Fighting through a grueling boss battle only to not be able to claim your prize because too many of your blue Pikmin died in the fight is a horrible feeling. Now here's some advice from me. The game automatically saves every time you enter a new sublevel, so if you have a particularly bad run on a floor, just restart the game. Yes, it's save scumming, and to be honest, I only ever did this for the final cave, otherwise I wouldn't have had so much of an issue when all my purple Pikmin died, as mentioned previously. But it's better to do this than having all your time wasted and the extra tedium you'll feel having to trek forward to find an exit so that you don't lose all your progress so far, only to then re-enter and do it all again. Especially because this game can be misleading at times. When you enter a cave, you can only bring in the Pikmin that the current captain you are playing with is using. Any Pikmin in the overworld, but not with the presently controlled captain, will just go back to their onions. This led me to believe that this was also the same in the caves as you go further and further down by jumping in the same holes that you entered through. But no, not at all. As long as the Pikmin is alive on that sublevel, it will join you when you choose to go down, even if it's nowhere near the captain. Heck, even if it's in the middle of drowning, it will still walk to you. The game does not tell you this at all, and I spent so much time manually bringing all my Pikmin with me to the exit across every sublevel, even if it meant having to get 80 non-blue Pikmin across a body of water, practically one at a time. It added to the tedium of the caves, and I only discovered that I could have avoided all this in the final cave on the 4th to last floor, when I panicked and jumped down the hole as most of my Pikmin army was drowning. Don't make my mistake. Now you know, and knowing truly is half the battle with this game. Given that the vast majority of treasure is hidden within the caves, players will spend most of their time in this game travelling through small, dimly lit corridors and trying to survive on the few Pikmin they could bring with them. While some later caves do try to shake up the formula with a specific gimmick, like the infamous water wraith of the submerged castle, a lot of them just consist of small, randomly generated puzzles or fighting lots of standard enemies while searching for treasure. It's not as fun as the better designed environmental puzzles of the overworld, and I totally understand why it's given Pikmin 2 such a bad reputation. That said, the caves are also the location of some of the best fights in the game, the boss battles. Bosses in Pikmin 1 were few and far between, but in Pikmin 2 almost every cave has a boss of some kind waiting at the end, and they can provide some of the more interesting challenges in this game. Sometimes it can be really simple to power up your Pikmin with the game's new spicy gels and bum rush your opponents, but other bosses require strategy and patience to defeat. Sometimes you need to perform hit and runs to avoid the boss's massive AoE attacks, and other times you need to stun the enemy with this specific Pikmin type before swapping to another to deal damage. It's a challenge, and in a good way for the most part. There are two bosses in particular that lean into the frustrating territory, however, the Man at Legs and the Ranging Boister. The former is just strong and fast, but the latter is just incredibly frustrating to actually do damage to, and I actively hated fighting it. Thankfully, the reward for bosses are often upgrades or new gameplay mechanics for the captains themselves to use, which is nice and makes it feel like the challenge was worth it in the end. Playing this game right after Pikmin 1 had some great charm to it thanks to how Pikmin 2 reuses parts from the first game but in new ways. I think it's really funny that the final boss of Pikmin 1 is an early boss in this game, and one that I completely steamrolled this time around. I no longer needed to sacrifice a bomb-carrying yellow Pikmin to stun him and save the rest of my army. I also like how some of the areas from the first game show up again here. The Forest of Hope from Pikmin 1 appears again in Pikmin 2 as the Awakening Wood, just starting the player off in a different location and setting up new obstacles across its identical map layout. Just that simple change makes it feel like I'm seeing a new perspective on an old hangout, and I think it hit me more playing these two games so close to one another. And doing that has allowed me to appreciate Pikmin 2 a lot more. It was already my favourite game in the series because of the treasure element, but now I'm finding more to appreciate. While I acknowledge how frustrating the cave system can be, especially the final 3 caves, I think the rest of the new additions to the game are incredible and have defined this series going forward. In a way, Pikmin 1 feels like an arcadey proof of concept for Pikmin 2, which is instead a full-fledged experience, being almost 5 times as long as the original, with more interesting and balanced content to enjoy. On the Switch, you can buy them both separately or buy Pikmin 1 plus 2 as part of a bundle, the only option for those wanting it physically this coming September. The bundle is probably the best option, but if you can only get one of the 2 games, then get this one. Pikmin 2 is easily the better game, with more charm and more to do. And just like Pikmin 1, there are technically 2 endings to the game, so if you really don't like the cave system, then you can try and ignore it and just focus on paying off the company debt. That only makes up the first half of the game, but back when I first played this, that was more than enough for me, and it's only now that I felt the call to go for that 100%. I want to thank Nintendo for providing us a review copy for this game, and I want to know from all of you whether or not you've picked up Pikmin 2 or if you're planning to pick up Pikmin 2. What was your thoughts and experiences playing this if you have done so already? I want to thank all of our patrons as well. The $5 tier are up on screen right now. Next week will be Pikmin 3 Deluxe, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out, because by doing so you'll always remember to return to the source.